Across the planet, oceans are being plundered, the world's fishing fleets hunting down the last great shoals of wild fish, often sucked up for animal feed. The last frontier in this marine Wild West, the South Pacific. This is the story of an exclusive investigation into what was once one of the world's great fish stocks.
This was the last frontier.
Absolute crisis.
Well, it's pretty disastrous, really.
The fish are hunted everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
Mort Rosenblum's seen more than his share of disasters and scandals. He's run news bureau across the world. His latest investigation into one of nature's last great wild resources.
Since the 1960s, I've seen us being mankind do really stupid things to ourselves, to our planet, to really the only neighborhood we have. And each decade, I see it get worse and worse. Since the 80s, I've been really watching it closely. And I realize now that what's really bad now are the oceans, the fish.
Mort's been working with the US-based non-profit reporters network, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the ICIJ. Their prize-winning investigations have revealed rampant overfishing across the globe. Together, they took the investigation into new territory, the South Pacific.
I took about 7 months with a team of some very good people, and we looked very carefully. We decided to focus on the jack mackerel, which used to be so thick here you could almost walk across it halfway to New Zealand.
What the ICIJ investigation revealed, stocks of jack mackerel, one of the world's most important fishing stocks, have crashed from 30 million tons to 3. And plans for an organization to save the fish have so far made things worse. It's a Wild West story of greed, foot-dragging, and literal lawlessness.
The jack mackerel was thought to be inexhaustible. There was supposed to be a huge stock that would never end. Now it's gone. Now it's gone. And it's amazing that it's gone because, you know, it was supposed to be there forever.
Lawyer Duncan Curry represents a coalition of ecology groups campaigning against the industrial fleets in the South Pacific.
This was the last frontier for fishery. The effect of this overfishing has quite simply been the demolition of one of the world's last great fishing populations.
Dockside at dawn. Many of Chile's small fishing boats have almost given up looking for jack mackerel. Mort found the only men handling them were what Chileans call gatos, or cats, bandits who may be supplying the black market.
Here's this place that was just jammed with jack mackerel in the old days. Today, it's only the cats, the bandits, that have it.
Later, Mort went to talk to the legal small fishing fleet in San Vicente. Captain Leal blames the shortage on the past record of the big industrial fishing fleets which have long caught most jack mackerel in Chile's waters.
Look at the large fishing companies and big ship owners. They know what the term murder means. They captured a resource, and as it wasn't the size they needed, they killed it and threw it away.
Jack mackerel are an essential part of the marine food chain. They swim in shoals close to the surface. So do many predators. In the Wild West underwater, they draw up the wagons when attacked.
The community structure of the marine ecosystem will change, and another fish will take over the function now performed by the jack mackerel. But it will take thousands of years. Thousands of years.
Don't know about jack mackerel? If you've eaten salmon, your stomach could well do. In Chile, most of the catch is turned into fish meal, protein fed to fish like farmed salmon. These fish are sardines. Mort wasn't able to get into jack mackerel factories. But the industrial process is the same.
I can think of a whole lot of battlefields I'd rather walk into than a fish meal plant. It's really important that reporters looking at this kind of thing look at fish meal plants because it kind of tells you what the whole thing's about. Fish are tossed through a thing. They end up chopped up. They end up into this kind of darkened gruel. They end up reduced. They end up put into a dryer, and then they're turned into this powder. Each one of those bags is 1/5 of an original biomass of perfectly good fish swimming out in the ocean. To me, I just think, what a waste.
Where much Jack mackerel powder ends up, the world's salmon and other fish farms, from here to supermarkets and restaurants.
Los datos, que yo me he preocupado un poco de tratar de encontrar ese número.
I have been concerned to find that the actual data suggests you will need between 5, 7, maybe 10 kilos of Jack mackerel to produce 1 kilo of salmon, which is ecological nonsense.
So this means that someone sitting in New York or London or Singapore who's eating a high-quality salmon, who says, well, I've never heard of Jack mackerel. But with every bite of salmon, they're eating 10 bites, up to 10 bites of Jack mackerel.
That's it. So the question is, if salmon production is ecologically sustainable.
Sustainable? Maybe not. Profitable? Certainly. By the 90s, Chilean companies with bigger and better vessels had seized their chance. It was a gold rush for the bronze-hued fish, Jack mackerel.
I met one Vilches who's not only a marine biologist, is also a fisheries master, which means his job is to go out with these big fleets and look for fish.
Bueno, eso para nosotros fue extraordinario.
For us, this was an amazing time. Economically, it was good. We only needed to travel a mere hour and a half or two to fish. We had the mackerel right there. The sizes were good. Nobody cared that the mackerel was shrinking or was being exploited too much. For us, it was God's blessing, so we were all happy. We thought this will never happen. We thought, ooh, we are fine. We earn good money for 7 years and we all live very well. No one ever worried that the Jack mackerel needed to reproduce.
Before long, stocks across the South Pacific were crashing. For every 10 Jack mackerel in 1990, by 2000 there were just 3. Where this had happened elsewhere, states had set up management organizations and legal quotas. Now South Pacific nations contemplated doing the same.
In about 2006, the Chileans and with the Australians and the New Zealanders and some others began to talk about a regional fishing management organization so that they could protect the stocks. And so that began to form. But the idea was to protect the Jack mackerel that was left, that was really outside the Chilean waters.
Talking without doing was an invitation to disaster. How to be sure you're allowed to catch lots if there were quotas in the future? Catch lots now and stake a claim. It was a marine Wild West.
What happened when these negotiations began was that the world's fishing nations came down to the Pacific and wanted to establish a fishing track record. Now that fishing record would be used, they hoped, in the future to establish allocations. So if a country such as Russia had caught, for the sake of argument, 200,000 tonnes in a given year, then they would use that argument to have a quota or a bigger allocation of fish in the future. Of course, what this meant was that there was a race to fish.
Soon, dozens of trawlers and factory ships from across the world were hunting Jack mackerel. They included a number of ships from EU countries. And the Lafayette, the world's largest floating fish factory, flying a Russian flag but Hong Kong owned and longer than 2 soccer pitches. And the Greek-owned Odin, flying the flag of the Pacific state Vanuatu.
The debacle really has to be placed, I think, at the doorstep of the world's industrial fishing fleets that simply use the system for their own advantage. The European fleet went from 1 vessel to 7 very quickly. The Russians came in, the Chinese fleets came in, and so on. But everyone is a loser for this, and the reason for that is simply the industrial fishing fleets, who treat the world as a giant chessboard, were able to come down and decimate the fishing population in a short number of years.
Owners of the world's big super trawler fleets, which travel across the oceans hunting catches, have been reluctant to talk on camera. Owners of the Helen Mary and other EU vessels which fished the South Pacific are represented by the Pelagic Freezer Trawler Association. In response to the ICIJ investigation, their president did spell out the irresistible attractions of fishing's last frontier.
This was, I think, the last area in the world where unregulated fishing was allowed, because everybody used to be allowed to fish freely in the waters outside the 200-mile zone. When you are confronted with competition in an unregulated area, you can do one or two things. Either let the competition do their thing and stay put, or you can move into the area yourself.
So if you don't fish there, then somebody else will?
Absolutely. Only in the free area. The rest of the world is already regulated.
The invasion of the South Pacific by the world's super trawlers made the need for binding quotas all the more pressing. But setting up the organization to enforce them was not going to happen overnight.
They've been talking about this organization and trying to organize this organization for almost 7 years now. It's not legal, it's not legally binding, it's only voluntary. It has to have 8 members ratify it, and one of those 8 members has to be an eastern coastal state, that is Peru or Chile. Until Peru or Chile ratify it, it's not going to be law.
It's 8 hours left to say the jack mackerel.
January 2012, and the nations trying to set up the South Pacific Regional Fisheries Management Organization meet for the 11th time, this year in Santiago. With no legal quotas yet set, scientists advising the organization were now seriously concerned about the jack mackerel's future.
The real problem in this fishery, and the thing that people really need to be concerned about, is that between 1995 and 2000, the adult stock was so heavily overfished that there are strong indications that the adults are no longer capable of producing good, strong classes, year classes of small fish. Certainly...
Why are they not capable?
Well, you just don't have enough adults around.
Despite the importance of the issues at stake, we were the only media covering the conference. We were not allowed inside to follow the discussions. The EU wouldn't talk on camera, nor would the man from the Russian company running the Lafayette.
Sorry, I encouraged you.
For the last 5 years, the organization has been setting voluntary quotas for jack mackerel. This year, scientists once again warned these planned catches were too high. They had a much lower overall target in mind.
The scientific advice that we have given is if the participants in this fishery genuinely want to start rebuilding the stock, and if they have any ambition to get the stock back up towards the sorts of levels that can produce a 1 million-ton catch, then our advice is that the catches should be less than 390,000 tons.
390,000. Halfway through, the signs weren't good.
What's going on in there?
There's been a lengthy discussion about the interim measures, and they are approaching an agreement which wouldn't be enough to save the stock, unfortunately.
It's fair to say that there's some fairly different views around the table.
You mean a row?
Yes, there's certainly a disagreement mainly about who should be taking what level of catch reduction.
With Peru pressing hard, Ecuador not turning up, and Chile unsure what it could deliver, the estimated catches came to well over the 390,000 tons the scientists had wanted. This year's catch could be as high as 500,000 tons, if there's enough fish left. Have you saved the jack mackerel?
No, we've made sure that it's got a fighting chance, I think, is what we've done.
We defend the position of Peru regarding to that we made a sustainable and management of the resources.
The Greenpeace poster this morning said 8 hours to save the jack mackerel. Have you saved the jack mackerel?
Sure.
Saving the jack mackerel is a case of, on the best scientific advice, is reducing catches. Reducing catches to a level which gives the fish a chance.
390,000. You said that yourself at the beginning of this conference.
Absolutely.
You haven't got it.
I haven't got, we haven't got to a guaranteed 390,000. We've got commitments.
And you are disappointed. You are disappointed.
I'm disappointed that we can't get that level of agreement. Yes, that's true. I think we could have done better, but we have got serious commitments by most of the players involved.
But even these arguably inadequate commitments will never be mandatory until the convention is ratified. Back to the Chilean coast.
We've come to the wonderful old city of Valparaiso, which is Chile's main port, to get the official government position after the convention meeting in Santiago up the road, the future of jack mackerel.
Mort spoke to a top official in Chile's fisheries ministry. He's optimistic that at least one key South American coastal state will ratify the convention, a precondition for quotas becoming law.
It is very likely that Chile will ratify during the next few months, and Peru has also said that they are in a position to ratify the convention too. As a consequence, conservation measures that are established for jack mackerel or for other fish will be mandatory measures and binding.
With 7 countries ratifying already, Peru or Chile would be enough. But Mort found Chile's fishing industry wanting even more.
Why is Chile not ratified?
Yo te puedo contestar cuál es la opinión del sector privado.
Let me give you the private sector view. We think that the Regional Fishing Management Organization will only be effective if the fishing countries on this side of the Pacific ratify the convention. However, we are recommending our government only to sign if the countries which fish on the high seas beyond our exclusive economic zone also sign up.
Fishing countries which haven't yet ratified include China, Vanuatu, Russia, and Korea. The Don Alfonso belongs to Mr. Sarkis's company, Blumar. They hold over 18% of Chile's quota. To find out how things are going for the big jack mackerel fishers in Chile this season, Mort went on board.
At least now, there's more of an effort to use jack mackerel for human consumption. What they do is they take samples from what's been brought up by the nets and do a different series of different tests. But they want to make sure that they're really in good condition.
Mr. Sarkis's company, Blumar, at least, is having better luck so far this year.
We did our catch. We shoot the net 3 times and we made the catch.
And how many tons?
600 tons totally. But I think fish is coming back. Now, from January until now, we have been finding fish in Chilean coast often.
The reason, though, may be ocean currents driving fish into Chilean waters, as the captain's boss is aware.
Internamente, aquí en Chile, hay una discusión respecto de que si esto se trata...
There is a discussion going on in Chile on whether the previous estimate of jack mackerel stocks was too low, or whether the warming of the Pacific Ocean has made jack mackerel move closer to our shores, and therefore made it easier for our fleet to locate them.
While Mr. Sarkis is more optimistic, scientists are unconvinced and concerned about what's going on in the high seas. To find out, Mort turned to the Chilean Navy.
Well, we went to the naval base in Talcahuano, and they very kindly showed us their tracking equipment because we wanted to see which vessels were out there beyond the Chilean exclusive 200-mile zone, and we found a bunch.
Among the ships out there once again this season, the Lafayette.
Lafayette? 1,300 miles. All the greens.
The Lafayette is the massive Hong Kong-owned factory ship which flies the Russian flag.
Odin.
Odin, yeah. Odin is from Vanuatu, which is really from Greece. That's
And the Chilean Navy have spotted the giant trawler Odin, flying under the flag of Pacific state Vanuatu, but owned in Greece. The Navy can't tell what these boats are up to. But it's clear that 7 years since the talks began, the race to fish is not over yet.
If it were up to you personally, as a biologist, not as an official, what would you do to protect jack mackerel, not only in Chile, but across the Pacific?
I think that if the next meeting of the Convention Scientific Group demonstrates that jack mackerel biomass continues its downward trend, then we will have to think seriously about possibly establishing a total moratorium for some years.
Yo creo que a lo menos deberían ser 5 años. Otros colegas me han dicho no.
I think it should be at least 5 years. Other colleagues have told me jack mackerel will need 10 years for at least 2 or 3 generations to recover sufficiently.
If there is not a moratorium, if they continue fishing, let's just say in 1 year, the vessels, all vessels, will now catch, say, 500,000, 600,000 tons of jack mackerel, what will happen?
Crisis absoluta.
Absolute crisis.
Se va a agotar.
Jack mackerel would disappear. It would have no time to recover.
The real concern is that jack mackerel is a relatively straightforward fish to manage. We know where the fish are, we know who's fishing for them, we know who's taking the fish out of the fishery, and we have some of the world's best managers and negotiators overseeing the fishery. So if we can't save this fishery in 2012, then what hope is there for saving other fish around the world?
San Antonio, south of Valparaiso. This fishing community still buying a little jurel, or jack mackerel, but catching less and less.
Long ago, jack mackerel was all around here, and we just caught them easily. Now, there are none left. Nothing to eat there. We have eaten everything. My son, he won't have anything to eat. By the time he's 21, there won't be any fish for him. I want to leave him something.
For Mort, at the end of his ICIJ investigation, a lesson for a hungry planet.
People keep saying, well, we'll find something else, we'll find something else. We're at the point where there really is nothing else. We are really using up these sources that are not going to be renewed. Once these fish stocks collapse, we won't have them. The only solution is for us to get real, to understand the problem, to at whatever level and whatever way, but to get it. I mean, to finally get it, that this is not limitless. This is not limitless.
If we go on like this, we won't have fish for a lot longer. The main fish we like to eat, what's called the table fish, it's predicted that perhaps we'll have for about 30, 40 more years, given the state of the rate of decline for many of these stocks. How this will affect the global oceans, we don't know.
Meanwhile, there's still no law to protect the jack mackerel in the South Pacific, fishing's last frontier.